Welcome to That 30s Show, a podcast where we talk about the good, the bad, and the surprising parts of our 30s. I'm G, and I'm finally 30. I'm excited to find out if 30 really is the new 20, because if it is, then the best years are yet to come.
And I'm David. I'm entering my mid-30s. I used to have no back pain or trouble sleeping, but now I live off a healthy diet of self-help books and dream of being in bed by 10 p.m. every night. Join us each week as we try to figure out together what life in your 30s is all about.
Welcome back to That 30 Show.
Welcome back, everyone. Right. And hey, Michael, how's it going?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me.
We've got Michael on as our first guest of season 2. So
ooh, no pressure.
That's really exciting. No pressure at all. We just want to thank Michael for coming on today. I'll do a little bit of an intro and then we'll dive right into our topic of the day. So in no particular order, this is not from most important
Michael's resume, his LinkedIn account. He just just reciting his LinkedIn achievements.
Most important to least important, but so Michael is a newish member of the 30s Club as well. So happy to have you join your 30s. He's a newlywed. I don't know if I can still say newlywed, but it was this year. So
that's
January. Yeah, back in January. It feels like a lifetime ago, honestly, but really only like 7-8 months.
Yeah. So I think you can still say newlywed. He's a homeowner, which is in Vancouver. It's very, very impressive. He is an only child. He is also one of the most hardworking people I know. So it's probably how he became a surgeon. Ooh.
Damn, that's sexy. Yo, Michael is so freaking attractive. Like, look at this guy. He's like $1 million smile.
Sorry, guys. I'm feeling very uncomfortable here.
But we'll definitely get into that throughout the podcast because that's what we're here to talk about today. Aside from that, fun stuff. He also enjoys running. I think you've recently done some like races, half marathons, full marathons. What did you do?
Yeah, I did 2 halves, but yeah. One was the BMO, and the other one was like it was a Vancouver half out of UBC.
Yeah.
But thank you for mentioning that. That's great.
Yeah, I knew you wanted that on the pod. So, and you also enjoy biking, swimming. So staying active.
Do you do triathlons? Because that's the triathlon right there.
No, man. So I tried to be, I started training for a half marathon because everybody else around me was doing it. And, when it was really time to, we started getting to swimming, we did a bit of biking and stuff like that. But really when it came down to like, we should actually do the half marathon or we should do the, Ironman and stuff like that. That's for the real athletes. So that's not me. I'm just doing this as a
that's the kind of limiting language that we don't do that on this show. There's no
okay.
You're not that athlete yet.
Yeah, you're gonna be that athlete.
I'm not that athlete
yet. Not yet.
But, running itself is already very athletic, so good for you. But I guess that's Michael in a nutshell. Michael, did I miss anything about you that you consider yourself?
I don't know, man. I think I really just think of myself as a kid from Richmond. Like G and I go way back. Like we were probably since we were like 13. I still feel like that same kid.
You feel like a kid at heart.
Yeah, exactly. Even though, even though you introduce yourself as a newlywed, you have a wife and all that kind of stuff, it never really, I hope it never really changes you, I hope it never changes me.
Well, I want to quickly provide a quick bit of context as to why we're really excited to have Michael on, because I don't know if folks listening remember, if you listened all the way back on episode 1, I think, right? In episode 1, we started talking briefly about work and like the role of work, and we got really excited and we're like, oh, this is such a great topic, we got to talk about this. And then you're like, oh, actually it'd be perfect to get Michael on, my friend, because he's like super hardworking, and he work is a big part of his life. And just to get his perspective on, how he chooses to, the kind of lifestyle he chooses for himself and what that means for him. And, I think that's a really interesting conversation. I had this conversation with a colleague just the other day about just, is sometimes feeling a little bit discouraged or demoralized or jaded with this, with the work life, if it's not something that's super fulfilling for you, and just feeling like you're having to do the job because it's what pays the bills. But oftentimes, unless you're really lucky, it's not something that you really get excited for every day. So it's kind of like almost like a slave. I've got to trade your time for money in a way that doesn't fulfill you. But anyway, so that's sort of, I think we've been building up in a way to this conversation and to having Michael on for a while. Ever since episode 1, we sort of mentioned work and the culture of work these days.
Why I wanted to have like Michael on is because, as I mentioned, he's one of the most hardworking, driven people I know. I remember even just going back to like high school, like during the summer, everyone would be taking summer classes, but it's like half play, half, summer school. But we would all go to like Michael's house and he would just have textbooks and he would just be reading them for fun because he's always just trying to learn. Wow. So it was like, ever since then, he's loving this. I see the smile on his face. But ever since then, it was like, just, it got even more, he got even more driven. And I want to know, like, even back then, did you always want to be a doctor?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for saying all those nice things. I don't know if I think maybe from an outside perspective, it seems like I work hard, but, I also struggle with, not feeling productive enough and also procrastinating just like everybody else. It's funny, the things you say, G, it makes it seem like I've been studying my whole life, but really I think it was like, my mom works at the library, and when I was little, she would set me up in an environment surrounded by books and stuff, so that I used to watch lots of shows, like back when Netflix wasn't a thing. I used to like stream all these How I Met Your Mother episodes and whatnot. So I wasn't as productive as you thought I was. I just want to say that. But yeah,
he's humble too. Damn.
No, but I think as life goes on, like you get forced into these situations where you have to meet a certain bar, to move on or to succeed. And so I think it's just a progression of things that have kind of forced me to work hard now. Sorry, your question, did I always want to be a doctor? No, I am more of an opportunist in a way. Like, I think I just wanted to, you're dealt like I always see things as like you're dealt a hand of cards, right, at the beginning of your life. And if you maximize how you play those cards, then like for me, that was my definition of success. And so I think at each stage of life, like every couple of years, I felt like the cards were getting reshuffled and it was dealt a different hand. And so, like my goals shifted based on that. And so, being a doctor, I think like an idea came earlier, but really, I think it was just like every time the hands got reshuffled, I ended up having different goals that led to where I am now. I think that's maybe the best way to describe it.
Can I ask, before you set your sights on becoming a doctor, it sounds like, as you said, your deck was shuffled a few times. So what did the deck of cards look like for you before you went on the doctor path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like immediately before that, I was in sciences, and I think, going into sciences, I had no idea what other jobs there were. Like, you just hear the traditional paths, right? And then at that time, I just wanted to succeed. I just wanted to be, the best version of myself. And so I didn't actually really know what that looked like. So I think I was watching Breaking Bad one day, and I thought, oh, it'd be kind of cool to like sell drugs. On a legal scale, right?
Like a pharmacist.
Yeah, or like, or to make these discoveries and you know, to like maybe find the next big breakthrough. Like I thought that was kind of cool. And so I ended up going into pharmacology to do that. And then when I went into pharmacology, I figured out that, you know, I did a couple of summers of interning, like, you know, you're at this cubicle and you're like, I was literally looking at mice lick their feet for 6 to 8 hours a day. And I was like, no, this is not it. And like, the pace is so slow here. Like, I don't see any tangible benefits to this. And so and then everybody else around me at that time was going into med school. Like pharmacology was kind of a feeder program for medical school. And so I was like, hey, I'll try that. Like that I mean, I had been interested in that for a while. It'd been on the back of my head. So yeah, then that's when I was like, yeah, success means medical school. So I started that.
Yeah, I totally forgot that you did pharmacology at first. Did you ever consider, like, when you were going into grad school, like, was there ever, like, the time and the money and everything that has to be devoted to becoming a doctor? Like, did that ever scare you, or did that ever what if you didn't enjoy it? Or were you just kind of like, okay, well, these are the cards that I've been dealt with now. If I dealt with different hands later on, then I'll just pivot again.
Yeah, it was more like that, because I know success is never, it's never a permanent thing, right? And so, you know, every year your definition of success probably shifts. Like for you guys, right? Like success last year or last season might have been to just get this podcast up and running, and now you've had so much success with it. Like you probably have newer goals for season 2, right? And so I think that was the same for me. I was like, no, I'll just make the best of what I can right now, and probably good things will come after, hopefully.
That's a very, I think, would you consider yourself an optimist generally? Like you're a pretty positive person?
Yeah, I think so. I kind of, I try to create disillusionments for myself to convince myself that what I did in retrospect was the right thing to do. So in that way, you know, you're like, oh, I heard a quote from, I think it was from some kind of storybook or whatever, but it really resonated with me, where someone had recommended that you live your life as if everything was rigged in your favor. And so that's kind of how I approach new opportunities and stuff like that. Like, oh, this was actually meant to be. It was perfect. It was exactly lined up how it was supposed to be. And so I treated it as such. So
I think what I really like about sort of what you're touching upon here is what I'm hearing is this, that like you deliberately and consciously sort of manipulate the self-narrative that you tell yourself. And that's a really common theme that I hear from like podcasts and books that I consume about like the story you tell yourself is the most important story that you'll ever consume. And it's not so much like what is actually going on. It's just like, how do you interpret it, right? So if you...
Like, this was supposed to happen to me. Like, yeah, this is like, where I'm meant to be right now.
Right. Such an interesting mind. Like, it's a mindset that you like brainwash yourself with almost in a way to be productive and be motivated.
But at the same time, I feel like there has to be that balance, though, because you have goals too. Like, how would you balance that and also kind of like going with the flow in a sense?
Yeah, it's a great question, G. And just for a bit of backstory, David, a few years ago, maybe several years ago, I know G is the one person that always, without doubt, makes a list of goals at the beginning of the year. And I thought I really enjoyed I would reach out to her at the beginning of every year, like, what are your goals this year? Like, how are you changing them up? And so it's funny you say that to me, like, because I actually, a lot of that was influenced by G coming up. So I struggle still with balancing between goal setting and just trying to live for the moment. And so I don't really have a good answer for you there, but I'm trying to learn from you, actually.
G's famous resolutions.
Yeah, you guys talked about it on the podcast too, right?
Yeah,
talked about it a bit. I have a question before we go too much deeper into the sort of the doctor life, or sort of what that looks like for you and how, you know, the highs and lows of that. So it sounds like, throughout your life, you have been pretty adaptable. You were in pharmacology, and then you shifted to medical school to become a surgeon. And before that, I'm sure you had, various directions that you were going for or different goals. But the constant, it sounds like, is that you were always very, very driven. You're always very motivated to like define and achieve success for yourself. And I guess I'm asking as someone who doesn't have that drive and doesn't have that like momentum and like bias for action in my life. Does it come from your parents? I knew your mom provided you an environment of sort of very intellectual sort of interest in being at the library all day, being surrounded by books. Were your parents, your typical Asian parents that were just pushing you to? Where does this drive come from? Is it a fear? Is it a fear of mediocrity? Is it a fear of not being something, or is it, more of a, like, do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah. David, you're so insightful, man. Like, not just today, but like, even the list of questions that you sent over, I was like, man, this guy really thought through exactly what he wanted.
Really curious person.
Inquisitive.
I love that. It's so I mean, I hope to match that level of thoughtfulness, but I probably won't.
No, that's
just
okay.
Just going back to, I guess, I mean, my parents are actually pretty chill. Like, gee, my parents are like they never pushed me to be anything. Like,
I'm
surprised.
Yeah, like
that was always like my question too, because I feel like your parents were very chill, but you just somehow always had that like drive. And I honestly never really like asked you either, like where it comes from. It seemed kind of like natural to you, but I'm sure there's other stuff behind it.
Yeah, I think, we're always a product of the environment that we're in. And so, I guess I was just really lucky to be surrounded by people that are very driven. Like the first person, our mutual friend, Stefan, I knew him since probably we were 11 years old, something like that. He was incredibly driven, right? He was very, almost too much. Like he would come over to my house after playing Halo. He'd be like, listen, I'm studying for the SATs because I want to go into like a Ivy League school. I never even knew what Ivy League school was at the time. And so I was like, sure, if you want to do it, I'll do it with you. And so he'd be like, come up with these study plans. And then he'd like crunch down the numbers. He's like, hey, to meet all of our targets, I think we would have to study for roughly like 26 hours a day. And then we'd be like, wait a minute, there's only 24 hours in a day. And then, it'd just be things like that and be like, well, it's okay. We'll just cram it so that there are 26 hours a day, that kind of thing. And then, and then you go into high school, like we were lucky, like G and I were surrounded by super driven people, like very successful now. And it was always kind of that standard that was set, like you must have some kind of direction. It really pushed you to find a direction, find something you're good at, and just try to keep going with it. Maybe that's why you're doing this podcasting as well, like just make use of the time given to you and the opportunities. Yeah.
But I feel like part of that must have come from like your own self as well, because we were in the same environment, but I didn't have that drive. So, so a part of that must have just come from your own, like what was just ingrained in you, or you saw that there are people striving to be really good as like such a major driver for you too.
Maybe. I would argue that you are also extremely driven. We just have different things that we're driven towards too, right? Like I've always been very narrow-minded towards a career, but like for you, like you pick up so many different things, like different hobbies. Like to me, like you're really living life, trying to experience everything, and that takes a lot of drive in itself, right? And like to create this platform too. Yeah, sorry, going back to that question, I think things changed a lot when I started playing basketball. You get into athletics, and the nature around that, especially basketball, is so like toxic masculinity at the time, right? And you're like, you watch all these Michael Jordan commercials, these Nike ads being like, you gotta just do it. You gotta push yourself to the limit. And I think probably after that thing, my life really changed around, because I started learning discipline. And I think I don't think it's drive. I think maybe it's just discipline, like the will to just keep on going and suffer through things. That's probably what it is.
And you always had that capacity to suffer through and choose discipline.
Yeah, maybe I've suffered through enough to like be kind of comfortable with suffering, I guess.
Damn, thriving in discomfort.
I sort of owe my inability to be disciplined and suffer through things as well as others to my overly not privileged, but I had a very, very comfortable and happy childhood. And I'm not saying you guys didn't, but like what it did for me was that I feel like in hindsight now as an adult, I look back and I'm like, okay, this bred complacency and a lack of experience to overcome adversity, because everything came easy to me. Life at home was very, very happy, very loving, very, very peaceful. There was no suffering in my life until like late high school, at the earliest. And I think that did not set me up because life, as Buddha, whatever said, life is suffering, right? Life is hard. And so I don't think I was equipped with the tools growing up, because I did not experience much hardship. But I don't know if you think that you're like, I mean, you don't have to go into any details, but like generally speaking, if you feel that your childhood exposed you to experiences that did make you more comfortable with hardship or not.
Yeah, I mean, much like you, David, I feel like we probably grew up in very similar circumstances. Do you mind if I ask, like, were your parents like very strict Asian parents?
No, they were the opposite of your typical Asian. They're just like, do what you love. Every time I come home from school, they're like, make sure you go to the playground first, play it, and don't do homework first.
Oh, that's not like my parents. My parents were the typical Asian parents.
Yeah, partly because I was a super nerd, and so they never had to be scared of me not doing homework, because I wanted to, like, I asked my mom for extra homework apparently.
Oh, maybe that's where the opposite is.
Really good child.
Yeah, I was goody two shoes, and so I think my parents didn't have to worry about me like not being responsible for my studies or not. In fact, I was too nerdy, so he's like, okay, make sure you like go and play, because like you can't just stay home and do homework and read books all day. But they weren't strict.
Yeah, I was the opposite.
They not your typical tiger mom or whatever.
And if you don't mind me asking, like when it got to the later years of high school, like what was that suffering?
Well, the hardship I had experienced in high school was more like social, like with friends and friendships and stuff, and like high school drama and stuff like that. So it was not academically, it was not like financially or family yet. The first real hardship was was on the friendship level. But yeah, I don't know. And then when university came, then the family hardships came, because my parents' relationship was tested, and then there were financial challenges for our family too. So there's a lot of hardship that sort of, I guess, came on, but not during my childhood. And then I think that's sort of why I'm not that. I didn't have to be disciplined. I didn't have to suffer. So I just didn't learn how to do it.
Michael, you said that like a lot of it is discipline, but throughout your journey, like, did you enjoy it too? Or is it all just like, okay, I need to do this to reach my goals and just head down, this is what I got to do?
I would say at the beginning, like in the high school stages, I liked it because we were getting immediate feedback. Like I don't know if you remember, but in grade 8, like I was talking to someone about this the other day, like they, cause I was a bit of a clown. I didn't really I wasn't mature at the time. So in grade 8, actually they held me back for math. I couldn't go along with the rest of you guys, if you remember that. I remember.
We're all surprised you made it to surgeon.
I'm not going to name names here, but there was a certain math teacher who, I mean, she was nice to me and everything, but she thought I was kind of clowny, and so she was like, "Yeah, I don't think you're gonna be fitting. Like, you're not gonna go to math 9-10 or whatever it was you guys had, right?" And then I was put in like normal math, and then that, like, to be able to qualify for IB math, I had to take summer school. And so did Stefan, like the guy that we were talking about before, right? So we were both like a little bit clowny. And so from that, I was like, well, if I studied a little bit, maybe I can do better. And then it was that direct, the more I studied, the better my grades got. Like you at a young age, you see that directly, and then people praise you for it, right? And you're like, wow, this is really cool. Like maybe like all the suffering is worth something. And then when it came to university, it was the same thing. But at that time, I stopped enjoying it because I started questioning, like, what is all this for anyways, right? Because it was such a rat race. And I don't know if you guys know a lot of people in science. It's like everyone's trying to climb into med school. And it's just like, I remember being in a physics class at the very beginning of the year. The prof was like, how many of you want to go into med school? This is a physics class, right? And then about 80% of the room put their hands up. And he's like, well, there's only really enough room for like 2% of you guys here, right? Or something like that. And then I remember he'd ask the same question year to year, and the numbers just started dwindling. But still, it was just way too many people for the number of spots. And then it just bred this kind of environment where you're just looking at each other like competition. Like you got to eat somebody else for you to be able to succeed, and that I really didn't enjoy. Like that was the worst part of it, I think. Yeah,
I hear that sort of free for all, everyone pit against each other. I hear that that's very similar to law school as well, which is one of the reasons I considered law, because I think I was like, I think I could do this, but I don't think I would have enjoyed that aspect either in law school, which I think is kind of similar. You're all vying for the top spots, being hired by the same best law firms. And it's like, if you fail, then that's my success.
Right. And it never really ends, right? Like you get into school and then you have to get a job, as you say. And then afterwards you have to like get the best job. But that really changed like after med school, or after getting into med school, then you're like, people specialize in so many different ways that it's no longer very competitive to do any one certain thing. And so really like working hard translated to you just being a better physician. And so then I started falling more in love with the process.
Well, I want to take us like to your current day life then as a surgeon. What can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you actually do?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Maybe I'll explain the clinical side of things, because right now, as G knows, I'm not on full clinical duty. I'm kind of on like a bit of a sabbatical. I'm doing like a research fellowship as my main thing, and I work in the hospital like maybe once or twice a week. And I'm still in my training, so I'm towards the end of the training, but still I'm not like a full time, surgical staff or anything like that. But the clinical day is like you start rounds very early. Like you got to see all your patients before you go into the OR. So we center our entire day around our surgical cases, right? The OR is open around, you start your first case around 8, so sometimes 7:30. So before then, you want to see all the patients that you have that you're responsible for. So I usually start around 6, get my team together, and then everybody kind of splits up and seats different people, and then we all come together before the OR starts, and we kind of discuss, okay, these are the plans for all of our patients today, and then you assign tasks, right? And then you go to the OR, and then your day kind of passes. You have your first case, probably takes maybe 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes, and then after your first case, you go grab a bite to eat, drink something, relieve yourself. And then if there are any consults that come in from the emergency department, like if David, you came to VGH for appendicitis or something like that, you'd probably be seen by one of our junior residents, and then after they see you, we'd review your case and look at your imaging, like a CT scan or whatever, and then just give you a plan, and then off we go to the next case, and then that kind of repeats itself around until probably like 5 or 6, sometimes earlier. And then you kind of tidy things up and go home.
When you say you're going from case to case, first one starts at 7:30 or 8, it's maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. Do you mean like an operation? You're like involved in a surgery or operation? So like in any given day, you might like be involved in 3 or 4 different surgeries and operations.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you also, I know this is a bit of a cheeky question, but like you mentioned, you know, after your first one, you might grab a bite, relieve yourself. So tell me, have you ever really needed to use the washroom in the middle of like your scalpel in hand, you know, the person's like guts are just hanging out, you're like operating on someone, and then you gotta pee really badly. Like, what do you do?
It's funny, David. Like when you're operating on somebody, I think my body has never needed to pee, like never.
Wow,
I think you get that adrenaline, and you get that fear, almost like a healthy fear, and all of your focus is just on the case in front of you, right? Oh, yeah. Do you play sports, David?
Yeah, I play badminton, not competitively though, just for fun.
Yeah, so it's kind of like I try to describe it like playing a sport, right? Like when before you go into a badminton match or whatnot, like during the badminton match, if you're fully focused on it, you never really need to pee, right?
Yes.
And so
your body's like in a fight or flight mode almost, like you're just in the zone. Yeah,
something like that, probably. Yeah.
I know you have the adrenaline during the surgery, but how do you feel after?
Yeah, so I'm still very early on in my career, and so I haven't done, especially independently, like I haven't done more than like a handful of surgeries, like without direct supervision. So right now, at the end of every case, depending on how it went, right? Like I'm very critical of myself. Like if I didn't do very well, I just feel like shit. Like I just feel like, oh man, there's so many things I could have done better. And then you go into this rabbit hole of like, sometimes you question like, if how, depending on how bad it was, right? If it was just a little bad, you're like, okay, well, I gotta do this better next time, this better. And sometimes if you do really bad, or if someone makes you feel like you did really bad, you're like, you kind of question your own abilities. Like, should I even do this for the rest of my life? That kind of thing, right? So that's a bad end. But on the good end, man, if it goes smooth, like there's nothing better. You feel like it's like you want to match, David, right? Like if you had some nice highlights in your head, you're like, oh wow, I can't believe I was able to do that. I can't believe how much I've progressed since last year. Like these are super good moments of just your own ability, right? And then not to mention afterwards you get to speak to the patient, and you're like if you came in for an appendicitis, we took out your appendix, you're like, hey, we were able to get the thing out that was causing you pain, and now you're going to be able to live like a nice, healthy, free life. That is such a gratifying feeling as well.
Okay, not gonna lie, like I know because you're looking at this as like work, but to me, when you're talking about like I could have done like the bad things, I'm just like, this is a surgery. It makes me like never want to go into a surgery. I don't know. Sounds terrifying. As the patient,
everything is always very safe and controlled, and I think by me saying, oh, that could have went better, like everything that was supposed to happen still happened. It's just that you could have got there much faster, or you could have got there in a smoother way.
Yeah. You don't switch around people's organs and be like, oops, I could have done that better.
Yeah. I was actually thinking the same thing as usual. I was like, what do you mean it could have been better? Like you tried to resuscitate them, but you couldn't. Oops, try it better next time.
Yeah.
No, something I want to make a quick comment on that that from what you said, Michael, is that I'm reading a book. I just finished reading a book called Grit, and I'm reading a book called Stolen Focus. And actually this is more about stolen focus, which is the idea that we don't our attention, our ability to stay focused and pay attention to things is dwindling as a society. And then the book talks about flow, the state of flow. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Michael, about like, there's a concept of state of flow. Have you heard of that? Yeah,
absolutely. I'm a big fan of that Grit book too, by the way.
You've read it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I listened to a podcast about it.
Yeah. It's close enough. So what you do as a surgeon or as a doctor, I think that that's something that a lot of us don't have, which is you have this 2 or 3 hours of literally undivided focus and attention. And I can just imagine mentally, you're like, it's kind of like this high, because how many of us are in that situation on a daily basis when we have 2 hours of no interruption to a single task at hand? And not only is this task requires your undivided attention, it also pushes your abilities to the very edge, which is what flow requires. Flow requires you to do something that you enjoy, that is within your skills, but at the very edge of your skills. So it's challenging, right? So that sounds like what that does for you, because you're telling me that you're improving, you're learning, it's challenging, but it's not easy, but you can do it, and you find yourself growing in your skills, right? So I almost envy you, because it sounds like your profession allows you to have this activity that requires focus, which is good, which we don't have enough of. And it provides you with flow because it pushes your skills to the very edge, but not past it. So for all those reasons, I can see how this is a very fulfilling way to spend your time professionally anyway. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, I love what you just said, David. I think that's an amazing skill that you have. Like you listen to one story and you distilled the exact reason why I went into surgery. Like I could not have better worded it myself, you know?
Oh, I'm glad you agree then. Because I mean, badminton match, that's a good analogy, right? Like sports, you're in the moment. And we as humans, we don't have that a lot these days, I think, because we're constantly, there's notifications coming up, there's chat boxes throwing up, we're like, oh, I want to go to the fridge. What's in the fridge? Do you, G, have that in your life? Like, do you have unfocused time?
No, actually,
Sorry, not unfocused time, focused time rather. Sorry.
I was thinking about this the other day, and I was working on our podcast stuff, and I realized that I was completely focused for 1 to 2 hours without stopping at all. Like I was just completely focused on that, which doesn't happen at work. I definitely get distracted at work. I open one tab and then I have to open another tab because I have some suddenly have another idea that I want to do. But so yeah, I was like, okay, well, I think it's because I'm genuinely enjoying doing this as well. But I think Michael has that, he enjoys it. It's like a problem solving thing. Like when you're doing surgery, right? You're just I need to get this problem solved and I need to figure this puzzle out. But also you have that stress that's put on you too, pressure, stress, everything together into this little pressure cooker. And then you just have to solve your problem. But do you ever feel me listening to you being in that environment, I feel like I'm burnt out just by hearing what you have to go through. You have long hours, you have all these stressful pressure. Do you ever feel burnt out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's mentally burnt out and physically burnt out, and then there's spiritually burnt out, right? So, well, first of all, I want to congratulate you for it sounds so awesome that you're able to have that flow state while you're doing this podcast, because it's because you've always been a creative person. It sounds like you've really been able to tap into your creative flow through this podcast. So that sounds amazing to me. The 3 kinds of burnout. So physical burnout, yeah, it definitely not being able to sleep before it was once every 4 days. Now I sleep a lot, way more. But once every 4 days you just not sleep, right? So the physical tolls, it definitely takes a while to get used to, but it's something to get used to. So there was a time when I wasn't used to it. As a later stage med student, I was kind of going across the country doing job interviews, basically. You work for maybe 2 weeks at a time at different hospitals and different programs to kind of show you that you're a hard worker and you belong on the team. So I remember I was in Halifax, my very first elective for surgery, and I'd just come off of vacation, and diving right into this, I was dead, man. My parents went with me to Halifax too, and they were oh, why don't we go get some ice cream after? You can check out the lobster, all the sites that Halifax has to see. And I remember just I didn't speak a single word. I was dead, man. I was catatonic in a way. Like I just sat there with my mind just racing, but my body not moving for hours. And then afterwards, as your body gets used to it, it becomes second nature. So physically burnt out, I don't feel that unless I'm coming back from like a very good vacation. Mentally burnt out, I would say the mental aspect of it, and maybe with all of our work, right? Like with anything, it's like criticism from and not meeting expectations from our superiors. And to me, I think that's a big source of burnout. Like, oh, I'm not good enough, right? And doing too much of one thing and not getting good at it, like that is a big source of mental burnout for me. How do I deal with it? I don't know. I'm still, trying to get through that. And then, yeah, exactly. And then the spiritual burnout is like when you are doing something I find that you don't feel resonates with your life's journey, right? Like it's not what you're meant to do. And so I think I had that before when I was counting rats. The number of times the rats were licking themselves.
You're like, I'm not supposed to be doing this right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely not supposed to be here. But now I don't get that. Yeah.
Now you don't get that, yeah. I was going to ask you a question, but I think you just answered it, which is like, it's life, it's tough. So like what keeps you going? Like, how do you not give up? How do you not be discouraged or demotivated? But I think in the last part, you just answered my question, which is that this is a spiritually fulfilling endeavor for you. And I think, I don't remember who said this, but there's a quote out there, maybe by Nietzsche, I don't know, some philosopher probably. But I think they said it's like, when you have a why, you can suffer anyhow. And so do you, it sounds like, and this doctor life, this is your, do you consider it like a calling? Like, obviously it's very fulfilling work, but like, it's certainly much better than counting rats or whatever, right? Mice. So is this your why? Is this it? Is there anything that you think this is just another step towards your ultimate goal, or is this enough for you to suffer anyhow this life right now?
Yeah. Beautifully said, man. I don't think there's an ultimate goal for me yet. Like as I said, it changes every time the cards get shuffled. But I think the satisfaction I get from seeing myself improve and from seeing the people around me grow, that is worth the suffering. And I think we shouldn't live, like I personally don't believe that living a life absent of suffering is good for you. Mm-hmm. Because you have to suffer to be able to, like, now I have so much free time because I'm on essentially desk duty. Like I do a lot of my work on the desktop now, right? I'm not in the hospital all the time. And I found that actually before, when I was like working these 80 to 100 hour weeks, that I enjoyed my weekends a lot more because I felt like I deserved it. Mm-hmm. And so now it's not that I don't enjoy my weekend, but they're a lot less spicy. They're a lot less flavorful than what it was before.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of the reason why you feel like you want to continue down this path still is because you probably do still have a lot to learn. Like, you're still pretty early in your career, right? So there's still a lot for you to learn and grow. I think when you're at a point maybe in your career where you just feel like a bit stagnant and you're like, this is as much as like I'm at the top here, this is as far as I'm going to go, then that's when you kind of feel like, okay, well, this is like, I don't feel good about working anymore. And I don't feel that like desire to keep pushing anymore because I'm like kind of there. And that's probably when you want to change things up.
Yeah. I'm curious if you guys experience a similar trajectory of growth at your work, or if you feel like you're late enough, like you're senior enough in your job that, that you've already reached that point, that plateau.
I feel like there's still growth for me for sure, but not as much as like because I'm not like in my field, I'm not like that early anymore. So I feel like there is some of that, but at the same time, I do kind of feel like a little bit stagnant as well. So it's like, it's not exactly completely one way or the other for me.
What you're sharing here, Michael, is really helpful for me. I'm sort of going a roundabout way of answering your question, but it's really helpful for me because I've always struggled with hard work, to be quite honest. And I think what I'm hearing, and it makes a lot of sense, which is that we as humans, we're meant to work hard for things and suffer to a degree. Life is not, as you said, it is not meaningful without that hardship. And so it's not about trying to avoid the hardship. It's about finding the hardship that works for you. And I think the reason I've struggled with work ethic or like discipline, etc., is because I've never found a hardship that works for me. And to answer your question, I still have not found it. I definitely don't have it at work. As lucky and as grateful I am for the job I do and the life it gives me. I mean, I'm jealous of you, man, because it doesn't give me that like, oh, self-growth, self-improvement, learning getting better, with my colleagues or whatever, like everything that you said, like I don't have that at all. And I think that's what's missing. And like selfishly, these podcasts or this conversation, I'm just trying to figure out my shit by like learning from other people. And I think what you said does crystallize it for me a little bit more, which is just I need to find the life that I want to suffer for, the goal that I want to bear hardship for, and I haven't quite found it yet. And I don't know. So do you have any advice for me or other people who might also be not aimless, but sort of treading water, not feeling like they're living up to their potential, not feeling like they have the motivation because the job's not amazing? Like it's like kind of like, how do you find your passion? You have something that you enjoy a lot, but like what if I don't? What if the person listening doesn't? What can they do about it?
Yeah, David, I think you hit the problem on the head right there. Like, I always remember one of my mentors earlier on, he said to me, working hard is the easiest part, right? It's easy to work hard. What's hard is finding what you want to work hard towards. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm. And so I think that's a problem I definitely struggle with right now is, to find that ultimate, goal or whatever it is that you want to go towards. Right. Something that another mentor has told me before is when you're lost in times like these, it's good to be a little bit underemployed. And so that creates a room for fostering creativity, for fostering what you want to do. And you must be careful about setting up what this is. Like, don't rush into things. Like, it's just like how we, at the very beginning, like maybe you're at the beginning of your badminton match or whatever, right? Like you lace up shoes, you're like talking game plan or whatever, right? Maybe you just dive into that, I don't know. But, you got to treat yourself like a professional athlete, like a professional at whatever you do, and take time to set yourself up. Like NBL, I'm a big basketball fan. I don't know if you are, David, as well.
I'm not. Sorry.
Not really. Okay. Maybe some of your audience will be, but football fans too. Like they take a whole week, like days, watching film of their next opponent.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. I watch hockey, and I think people in hockey do that too. They watch a lot of tape.
Exactly. You gotta watch tape. You gotta and then you tailor your approach based on how your game is. Your game is only going to be like a 3 or 4 hour period, but the time leading up to that takes much, much longer. And so I think that's the way to think about a career is like your career might be pretty short, or like the amount of time that you spend at work is pretty short, but the time that you take to prepare for it, to prepare yourself mentally and physically and spiritually for it might be a lot more than that.
My personal testimony to when I feel like the happiest or most fulfilled is kind of like what you were saying earlier, Michael, about how when you were working those like 80 to 100 hour weeks, you would have like, you would feel more fulfilled and enjoy your weekend like that much more. I think it really is just like putting yourself in challenging situations and overcoming them. Like what we've been talking about a lot on our podcast is like, you have to get into those uncomfortable situations. And then when you overcome them, at least for me, that's like when I feel the most like fulfilled and happy. But not all of us like want to do that because it's uncomfortable, right? Like it's not, you want to, I don't know, humans just want to be like in a state of comfort. So it's not naturally what you want to do. But for you, like, I feel like your job always has that. It's like putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, right? Like maybe one day when you are comfortable with it, then you won't feel like as fulfilled anymore because right now it's still a challenge to you and you're still learning and growing. But that's what brings you joy, when you can like solve that problem or puzzle. At least for me, that's when I feel most fulfilled.
Right. And you get that from diving, right? From our previous conversation.
Well, it's like a lot of things. Like I feel like for work, even when I feel the most fulfilled is when I accepted a challenge or something that I was uncomfortable with doing and I did it. And then afterwards, it's like that after work feeling of when you're like, oh, like I overcame something so challenging today. It's a great feeling, but it can be anything, right? Like we've been doing our cold showers, putting ourselves into other like uncomfortable situations. Yeah.
Just building on what you said, G, I think for me and for some people that I've talked to, like the thing that makes me the most happy, like the purest form of happiness, comes after conquering, exactly as you said, conquering a fear, or in situations where you think there's no way I'm going to get out of here. Those are the most like, and then you do get out of it. Oh man, those are the best, like sheer nirvana, you know, like I think that's the highest form of happiness for me.
Right now, Michael, because you're on desk duty, leave, whatever you're calling it, do you feel like you have more time to like enjoy other aspects of life? And do you miss those 80 to 100 hour work weeks? Like, how are you feeling in terms of fulfillment these days?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest and say I'm quite lost at the moment. So I struggle to find work-life balance as you do, G, outside of work, because so much of my life was my work for such a long time. I found different hobbies, right? Like different challenges, like running that half and trying to pick up, like I'm going to try to pick up some sort of martial arts with a buddy. But yeah, I've had a lot more time to sit down and just have time to myself, which has been fantastic. But I also struggle now with finding a purposeful activity as a life component of the work-life balance.
And I think it's interesting that you even say that, because that's what makes you in how you've achieved what you've achieved. In that when you are in this phase of lower stress and demands because of your sabbatical, whatnot, it occurs to you that something's missing. Whereas for a lot of folks, if you're just comfortable, they're not going to be like, wait, I'm too comfortable right now. I need to find something to work hard for. Right? Yeah. I think that's actually just in a nutshell. That's what makes you different than someone else who might not be achieving everything that they could achieve, is that you want that hardship and the goal to be striving towards. And when you don't have it, you realize it, and it's something that's missing. A lot of people, as G said earlier, they're just happy being comfortable.
Totally.
Or they're happy, quote unquote. They think they're happy, but maybe they could be happier. Yeah,
exactly. I find myself like I have to actively think about that all the time, where like if I'm comfortable, I'm like, okay, maybe I should go be doing something. But to Michael, it's like, I don't want to say it comes naturally, but maybe it does, because when you're in this state right now where you have a lot more free time, like you're just like, okay, where is the challenge? Where is my work? Like, where is, the hard stuff? So, but maybe that's also just ingrained in you from so many years of having to do that too, right?
Yeah, maybe this is a super interesting area that I wanted to get you guys' opinions on too, like this whole work-life balance, right? I feel like at times this whole work-life balance is something that's sold to us by, like books like the 4 Hour Work Week or whatever, right? Like that you have to achieve some like measure of, you have to have this many hours of work and then this many hours of free time, and your free time should be, you should exercise, you should meditate, you should do this and do things that are fulfilling to you, have some kind of arts in your life or creative outlet and stuff like that. Like, I wonder if that like is the reason why we sometimes struggle like with that work-life balance is, hey, I've achieved this formula, but somehow I don't feel very balanced,
Well, I think it's because a lot of people their career is not what they actually enjoy doing. Like if you enjoy your work so much, then you kind of have that balance. Like even if you want to work 80 to 100 hours, that to you is balance because that's also part of your life. But for a lot of people, like their work is work. Like, they go to work, they earn their money and they come home and they try not to think about it and they maybe dread going back to work the next day. So in order to have that, they need things that they do enjoy, life and work. Like it's very separate for a lot of people, right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Work-life balance as a concept, as a ideal, exists solely because for the people who do seek work-life balance, these people don't enjoy work. I don't enjoy, like I don't enjoy it, but it's not spiritually fulfilling. It's not like, oh, this is what I'm happy spending my time on earth doing this. This is what I'm meant to do. Like I don't have that. And so because I don't have that, that's why I need work-life balance. So not everyone, I mean, I think if you're like, so I think it's safe to assume based on this conversation, Michael, you find your work very fulfilling. It's very spiritually fulfilling and very meaningful. You're very lucky. I think most people, many, if not most people, don't have that.
Yeah.
So being on the other, and thank you for saying that. Like, I do feel very fortunate that I somehow stumbled into something that I like. But I mean, being sometimes on the other side of not completely loving what you do you find that like carving out time to hit these specific goals that, you read in books, like I need to have X amount of time for my creativity, X amount of time for just leisure, X amount of time for exercise. Like, does that balance work for you? Like, do you find that makes you happy?
Well, I don't like necessarily set out time, but to me, like work-life balance is that I'm not consumed by work. Like, and that's probably because I'm not like you where I like feel like work is not a job anymore, because I do feel like that. So to me, it's like, okay, I have my work and then I also have the things that I want to do in my life. That to me is balance. Like if I can have both, then that's balance to me. I don't necessarily have to schedule it, but it's having that.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
What I'm learning from you, Michael, and from the books I'm reading and this conversation is that I don't need work-life balance when I've found a goal in my life that I care about to do. Everything will fall into place. Like Grit talks about this, which is one of the questions I was going to ask you, but it's like you need people who have grit, who have success in their life. They have a high level goal. And then under this high level goal is like 3 somewhat high level goals. And then it branches off. And then everything that you do in your life moves you in the direction of this highest level goal. Whether it's getting enough sleep, taking care, like, meditating, whatever. Let's say like you want to be the best. Let's say your high level goal is to serve society by saving lives and being a doctor. Well, for example, you could be like, well, I need to meditate, not because I need to meet a quota, but for me to be sharp and rested and have a clarity of mind. This is what I need to do to be a good doctor, right? So it's not like, oh, I'm doing meditation just because I need this balance. So I need this life part of me. It's like, no, what do I need to do to push myself towards this high level goal? And I think that if your high level goal does not involve you having to meditate, then you don't need to meditate. If your high level goal does not involve you having to have leisure time, then you don't need it, and it's not a deficit. So I think we need to ask ourselves, what is the high level goal, and what does our life look like? What does our life need to be to get us in the direction and move us towards this high level goal? It's not about a formula or work-life balance. I think the reason, as we've discussed, that work-life balance exists for people who, like me, whose work is just a job, and there may be a lack of a high-level goal that we are passionate about, that we are working and striving towards, that is our life, the life goal that we set for ourselves. So it's maybe not directly answering your question, but sort of more philosophical, like why does work-life balance is even here? I think it's because people lack a goal, and so they need to find leisure and pleasure in life outside of work to make the work and suffering that they don't want to suffer for worth it. It's like, oh, well, at least I get to, have my Chardonnay or my red wines and stuff, and so I can go back and suffer for the next 35 hours this week. It's not, and I don't want to live life like that. So right now I am personally trying to figure out my higher level goal and to make everything else more meaningful.
Yeah. Man, David, that was so insightful. I'm very glad we had this conversation today, because that's something that I will take away with me. So thank you for that.
Well, can I ask you, in not just why it's insightful, but so what is your life right now? That's, I guess, my question, right? Do you have a higher level goal that your current work gets you closer to, or is your current work already the final goal?
Yeah, my current work definitely isn't the final goal. I think I still don't know what the final goal is, but what you said about that, having that main hierarchy goal, a couple goals that fit, but all with that drive you towards that main goal. I think, being good at my job and being the best surgeon that I can be is probably one of those sub goals. And then another one right now, which I'm working on, is trying to find a way to make healthcare equitable for everybody, right? I specifically focus on immigrants, because that's kind of where our background is from. And so I think I have a few of those sub goals, but I struggle all the time with what is the main thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's I got that concept from the book Grit, which is change how I live the rest of my life. So if anyone's interested, I highly recommend that book.
Maybe one last question for you, Michael, because this podcast is about that 30s show. I guess, you just turned 30 not too long ago, but in your 30s, do you see kind of your lifestyle or your goals maybe shifting for the next few years? I feel like a lot of people who have a career similar to yours, where they're just they put in so many hours and they're always in high stressful situations. For example, athletes, they work really hard for a period of their time, and then they retire early, or they're they sit back earlier on, and they can reap all the benefits of putting in that hard work earlier on. So do you kind of see that for yourself, or in the next few years, what's the crystal ball saying?
Yeah, I entering the 30s club as a very juvenile member, I think the 30s will probably be the most productive decade yet. I think my life will drastically change for sure, because I think I'll, finish training and start establishing a practice and all that kind of stuff. So that comes with its own challenges. So the grind, not necessarily the grind, I'll say the climb doesn't stop. And I hope it never does. You're saying whether you meet a point where you can retire, and I hopefully, if I've done the right things throughout my life, I'll never have to retire. And I think the
Amen.
benefit of what I have, I've already sowed the benefits of my hard work, in that, I'm able to do this. I'm able to live in Vancouver. I'm able to, still maintain good friendships with people that I grew up with. And I'm really thankful for that every day. And I think just having the opportunity to see another mountaintop, instead of seeing a plateau, I'm staring at the side of a cliff, right? There's like so much left to go. I think that in itself is exciting, and I'm very thankful for that.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Well, we'll see what the next decade will hold for you, I guess.
So something that Lewis Howes does on his podcast, he's a motivational lifestyle coach person.
Mm-hmm.
I want to quickly do is he acknowledges the guests at the end of the podcast. And Michael, this is literally just an hour ago. I've never met you. I've never talked to you, but don't mind me being a bit cheesy. But I just want to acknowledge that like it's so clear, even just from this conversation, that like what shines through for me, that's something I appreciate, Michael, and that I am inspired by from you is no matter, regardless of the success that you've had in your life in the traditional sense, career and with your wife and with your home and all that, in the way that you have this conversation with us that I don't see in everyone is you exude so much humility, curiosity, open-mindedness, and self-reflection. You ask us questions, not that I need my guests to ask me questions, but like the fact that you do, it tells me something about who you are. The way you answer your questions about like, oh, it's my environment. I don't think it's an act. I think you're giving your honest answer, but it's like you recognize that, I think something that I've heard of, for example, right, is that always you should always realize that luck plays a huge role in both your success and your failure. Mm-hmm. And that there's only so much that you are responsible for, in the sense that we have to be grateful when we are successful, and we have to be humble and self-compassionate when we are failing, because there's a lot of things that are just serendipitous and not within our control. And when you say like, oh, I'm happy to have friends that are very driven, or my mom put me in a library every day. I just want to acknowledge that your character is really solid.
Well, thank you so much, David.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that energy onto this conversation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I got to thank both of you for having this creative outlet and for the insight that, like, I feel like I was just in an hour-long therapy session, like, and now I have a little bit more of a zest for life, So thank you for putting on this platform. I think it's I feel like each time I listen to your episodes, it's a different theme, and I'm learning something different about life and about your 30s. And so I don't know if that's the original intent of it, but I feel like every time it's original content, and that's definitely hard to achieve. So congratulations to you both for doing that.
Well, thanks for saying that. And that is our exact intent with this podcast, because we wanted to just interview different people living in their 30s in different walks of life, right? And everyone is living it differently. So it's nice to hear. But yeah, thanks again, Michael, for coming on. We've been friends for so many years, so I know a lot about you, but I actually, learned quite a few things from this podcast. So thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me let me wrap up by just reminding folks to give us a follow wherever you are listening to podcasts. If you enjoy the contents, it can really help us out if you give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Let us know what your thoughts are. We've launched our Instagram now for season 2 at that 30s show pod. So give us a DM, tell us when we're good, tell us when we can be better. If you want to come on the show, like we have many friends that we're very lucky to have, but whether we know you or whether we don't, I think it's just interesting to talk to folks in their 30s and just learn how your life is, how you're living your life, and sort of what you do to thrive. And so let us know if you're interested to come on. But thanks so much for listening. Hope you'll tune in next week, and see you on our socials. We're like, hopefully by the time you're listening to this, we've got clips up on TikTok. We've got shorts up. We got video clips up on our Instagram Reels, and so definitely give us some follow. It should be that 30 Show Pod everywhere you find us. So thanks again, Michael. Thanks, G. We'll catch you all next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Looking forward to seeing more content from you guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Bye.